of, though. And I've been working on Otter Creek for some time now, and so it's really a pleasure to see you guys all here and all of you concerned about this issue. The way this evening's, what we've got planned, as you can see, we invited the State Land Board to come and join us here this evening, and they didn't. But we still have water for them, so if they do come in, their voices are a little bad, we can get them taken care of. But the real point of this evening is public participation. You know, this is kind of an exercise in democracy. The Otter Creek coal tracks are in southeast Montana, but you know, the effects of the mine there actually have a global reach. We didn't think it was too much to ask that the land board come to Missoula and have a hearing. They chose not to, so we decided to go ahead and do this tonight and give people the opportunity to give their thoughts on new coal mining in Montana, global warming, you know, what this looks like for economics for our state, and just how you feel about it generally. So we're going to quickly give an overview here of the issue of Otter Creek, because I don't know how familiar everybody is with the Otter Creek coal tracks and this whole fiasco this state has been in for several years now regarding Otter Creek. Talk a little bit about the effects of the coal mine there, and then we'd like to invite everybody to get up and give your thoughts on this. As you can see, we are recording this evening, and we are going to be taking a copy of what we record to the State Land Board before the meeting on December 21st, where they will make their decision about what happens with Otter Creek. So your comments tonight that you give will get to the Land Board itself. So with that, I think I'll invite Ann Hedges up here with Montana Environmental Information Center. And Ann is going to give you a brief overview of how we got here in the first place with Otter Creek and some of the implications for global warming. So, Ann?
Let's see, do I need this? Sure. Hi, I'm Ann Hedges. I'm with the Montana Environmental Information Center. Thank you all for coming, and I want to also thank Northern Rockers Rising Tide and Montana Conservation Voters for also helping to sponsor this event this evening. This is a big deal, and let me give you a little bit of background. Montana, the state of Montana, when the Noranda gold mine was being bought out by the federal government, and the Noranda gold mine was adjacent to Yellowstone National Park. They were being bought out by the federal government because of the concerns over water pollution going into the park. And when that was occurring, the state of Montana cried foul because they were concerned that they wouldn't receive revenues, taxes, jobs that would have occurred had the mine gone in. So they went to the federal government and they said, this isn't fair, we want something. And in fact, at that time, the Montana delegation of Representative Rick Hill, Conrad Burns, and Senator Max Baucus worked with the state of Montana to get a deal with the federal government to trade out, and well, they gave Montana a choice. Either Montana got $10 million or it got the Otter Creek coal tracks. Mark Roscoe at the time, over the objections of the Secretary of the Interior, Babbitt, he chose the Otter Creek coal tracks. Now Babbitt had told Mark Roscoe that these tracks would be difficult to mine and may never be able to be mined. And Roscoe said, I don't care, I want those tracks anyway. And so the state of Montana got the Otter Creek coal tracks. They're about, the state of Montana owns a checkered board ownership with Great Northern Properties, which is the largest coal owner in this region. And if one person is going to mine, they have to be doing it in conjunction with the other because it's uneconomic to mine the state section without cooperating with Great Northern and vice versa. So the state of Montana got these coal tracks, and together with Great Northern, there's about 1.3 billion tons of coal. Now it is an enormous quantity of coal. And when that coal is dug up and burned, and this is usually burned in a coal-fired power plant that makes electricity. There's other coal plants, but all of them end up putting CO2 into the atmosphere. The general calculation is it will release about 2.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And just to give you a little bit of perspective of what 2.5 billion tons of CO2 is, the state of Montana in 2010 is anticipated to release about 40 million tons of CO2 from all sources in 1 year. 40 million tons from all sources in Montana versus this one mine, which once it's all mined and burned, will release 62 times that amount. So all of the little efforts that we go through in our daily lives to try to reduce our carbon footprint, all of the things we do at the state and the national level to try to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide going into the air will be significantly undermined by the development of coal resources like Otter Creek. And that is exactly the message that Dr. Steve Running gave to a couple land board members last week. When he went to Helena, he and Dr. Powers went to Helena, and they gave the land board, Denise Juneau, the superintendent of public instruction, and the attorney general, that message and said, you know what, these are the weighty issues that are being debated in Copenhagen, but in fact, this is where the decisions really get made, is do we have politicians who have the political will to say no, that the buck stops here, we're not going to continue down this destructive path. It's not only destructive to the atmosphere, it's destructive to the people who live in the area, it's destructive to the water resources in the area, it's destructive to the wildlife. So Otter Creek is going to have a significant impact on not only that area, on the state, it will also have a significant impact on the prospects of getting our carbon under control in Montana and in the nation. So we really appreciate people being here this evening. The land board refused to have any public hearings outside of Helena. There's one next Monday morning at 9 a.m. If anybody wants to come, you're welcome to. We'll be there. But since most people are unable to drive to Helena at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, we thought it was essential that we got some more voices into this discussion for the land board to hear that there's people outside of Helena and outside of just a couple eastern Montana counties that really do care about this issue. So thank you for attending, and I think I'm turning this back over to Mike.
Just Heidi. Before we got started too, I wanted to just take a minute and talk briefly about some of the more on-the-ground impacts that a coal mine or coal mines at Otter Creek would do to the local environment there and the local communities. And I think it's important that we recognize that the Otter Creek coal mine is also tied to another project intimately. This other project is called the Tongue River Railroad. Right now, there's no transportation to get the coal out of Otter Creek. And there's been a railroad proposed for almost 30 years now, I think. Maybe it's a little over 30 years, known as the Tongue River Railroad. Tongue River Railroad was originally proposed to go to another coal mine, which would have been north of where Otter Creek is, called the Montco mine. And when the Montco mine was abandoned, the Otter Creek or the Tongue River Railroad was put to bed for a while. But when the state acquired the Otter Creek coal tracks, this project came back to life. The Tongue River Railroad is a 121-mile line that would go approximately from Decker, Montana, up into around Miles City, where it would connect in with an east-west line there. This train's purpose is to haul coal, and that's it. It would haul coal from the proposed mines at Otter Creek, but it would also haul coal from the coal mines in Wyoming. In fact, it would give the coal mines in Wyoming much more viable route to get their product to market, meaning that those coal mines would, their product would become more economical and they would most likely expand. But Otter Creek has long been known as the anchor project for the Tongue River Railroad. It's the project that will get people to invest in this railroad and make it actually happen. This railroad goes right along the Tongue River. So if you can imagine eastern Montana, Tongue River comes out of the Bighorn Mountains down in Wyoming, and it goes up and it flows north and it feeds into the Yellowstone River. The Tongue River Railroad would go right along the river, and there are family farms and ranches there that have been there for a century. That rely on that river to irrigate. Now, when you build a railroad across a ranch, you can't irrigate very easily anymore because it's got to be a berm. You've got to build that higher up, and that's where the railroad runs. So the irrigation water can't come across anymore. It poses a threat to wildlife and to livestock. Railroads also start fires, and I think it's very important to remember that this is a very, very dry area. We're talking less than 13 inches of precipitation a year. So, we'd see a large increase in fires, and, there are no fire departments down there. They're volunteer fire departments. They're ranchers who get out there and actually put those fires down. If you have a railroad there, you can't cross your ranch any place you want to anymore. You have to cross where the railroad company says you can cross. There's a lot of people, everybody talks with Otter Creek about jobs, but there's a lot of people's livelihoods that are very much threatened by this railroad, and I think we need to keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to say about this as far as local impacts go, it really has to do with water. Water is probably the biggest issue in the West right now, and I think everybody's somewhat aware of that. In this area in particular, groundwater is like gold. When you get less than 13 inches of precipitation a year, you need every spring you have to be viable. You need your wells to work. And wildlife absolutely depend on these free-flowing streams that come out of the ground. Now, the interesting thing about southeast Montana and actually northern Wyoming is that the coal actually serves as the aquifers. That's where the water is. So when you cut a huge gaping hole in the ground and you take that coal out, you stop the flow of water. And when you stop the flow of water, you totally rearrange how life functions and how ecosystems function. And that is a major threat that people are very concerned about with this potential mine. We would also see pollution into the Tongue River. That would come from the railroad. Hundreds of thousands of tons of sediment would end up in the Tongue River during construction of this railroad. But in the Tongue River is also very impaired right now by coal development and by coal bed methane development. So this is just another thing on top that this river really does not need if it's going to survive. The pollution that can go into this water is a threat to not only to irrigators but also to the wildlife that lives in this region. And anybody who's been down there knows that this is a very rich area in wildlife and in recreation potential. So I think that's all very important to keep in mind. I think you've probably heard enough from us right now. And we have, looks like a few people who have signed up. Let me,
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
Is the land board taking emailed comments at this point, or?
Yes, they are. You can email the land board members, and I would encourage everybody to do so. And at the end of the evening, we'll go over contact information and stuff like that, but yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain to us exactly what stage of the decision-making process?
Yes, that's a very good point. We are at the stage in the decision-making process right now where the state is going to decide whether or not they're going to sell this coal. As Ann said, the coal is in a checkerboard fashion. So GNP owned one checkerboard spot, and the state owns another. And just imagine a checkerboard, and I think it makes sense. But the state has to decide whether or not they're going to lease this coal to a coal company to actually mine it. This is the best place to stop this coal mine. Once it's leased out, industry interests come in, and it becomes much harder for us to stop this if we're going to. So this is the time to act if you are going to act on Otter Creek.
Can I say one more thing, though?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the leasing stage for leasing the coal. And one of the things the land board, I think, is relying on is the fact that they still have to go through the whole environmental review process and the permitting process. So once they get the right to mine, or the right to that coal, then they have to submit a permit application to the Department of Environmental Quality and go through the MEPA analysis, the analysis under the Montana Environmental Policy Act. And the land board wants us to rely on those permitting and MEPA processes to protect us and to protect our interests. But in fact, the legislature in the last decade has significantly weakened those laws, the Montana Surface Mine Reclamation Law and the Montana Environmental Policy Act. And so those laws simply don't have the same protections that they did a decade ago to protect our interests. And neither one of those laws really consider global warming. For example, in the Highwood Generating Station, the coal plant near Great Falls, DEQ said, well, we don't really have any authority over global warming, so it doesn't really matter. We're not going to do anything about it anyway. So you know, you can't rely on those future permitting processes. Those processes are designed to issue permits. This is where we stop a mine. This is our first, not our first, but it is one of our best shots at stopping this mine.
So before we begin inviting folks up to actually give comments, let's just make sure there's no other quick questions that we need to address. Yes, ma'am.
Have the Northern Cheyenne weighed in on this?
You know, this is an issue right now that is really splitting the tribe. And yes, they have. Officially right now, the tribe is supporting the development of the Otter Creek tracks. Now, I spend a lot of time down there on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation and work with a lot of folks down there. And there's a lot of concerns coming out of the Northern Cheyenne about the ancestral homeland value of Otter Creek. Otter Creek is a place that was very important to the Cheyenne tribe. This is where they would come back to in the winters. It had abundant game, good water, and it was a good place to spend the winter. So there's all these historic sites from that, but also after the wars ended and the Northern Cheyenne were released from Fort Keogh, where they were held as prisoners of war, about 44 families resettled in the Otter Creek Valley, and they did so under the authority of the Indian Homestead Act of 1872 or 1873. Those homestead sites are still largely, it's unknown where they are. A lot of people on the, you know, especially descendants of these people, are very concerned about a mining company taking over this area because they know that once a mining company starts going, it's easier to hide an archaeological site than it is to report it, and they're very concerned that that's what would happen to, you know, the places where their ancestors lived. So there's a faction of the tribe that's working against this, but their official stance as a tribal government is supporting the project. Yes?
Have they weighed in on the potential degradation of the Tongue River as well?
Well, no. No, they haven't addressed it. Yes, ma'am?
Just to clarify, most of the surface is owned by private landowners, or is there some surface owned by the state as well?
No, yeah, the surface is mostly owned by the state. And yeah, and there's very few private surface rights there. Now, the state land there has largely been leased out. My understanding is it's used primarily for grazing right now. So.
Do you have a map of the lease areas here?
I actually have one on my computer that I can show anybody after the event if you'd like to take a look.
We won't be here that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, one more question here, and then I want to get rolling and get this opened up for folks.
I had two, if I can remember.
Okay.
One of them was if the ground that the railroad would go across is currently private, does that mean it will, some big chunk of it will be condemned?
Yes.
And
That's-
taken out of active agriculture?
The Tongue River Railroad Company is threatening condemnation both on state-owned land and on private land. In fact, they're threatening condemnation over a fish hatchery in Miles City right now that hatches the endangered pallid sturgeon. It's one of the only places in this country where pallid sturgeon come from, and they're planning to build their railroad right across that hatchery.
So every one of those ranchers in these lovely little oxbows of the river with sub-irrigated hay meadows
Yep,
are going to be, it's going to be trashed.
you got it.
That doesn't sound very good, does it?
No, not at all.
The question is, where is the market for this coal?
That's another good question that nobody seems to be able to answer. This coal has a limited market because it's so high in sodium. You can only burn this in relatively new burners. You know, it's funny, you go down and you talk to, you know, I've talked to a lot of guys around Colstrip that have wondered what on earth people are thinking. Because with sodium that high, your boilers become unreliable. You get slag in the boilers, and you have to shut them down to clean that stuff out. So your energy source itself, you know, coal is supposedly, you know, cheap and reliable, right? That's the only things they can use to market it. It's not even reliable when you get into sodium levels like this. The market, the existing market is in about, my understanding, about 30 plants in the Midwest that are all right now fed by Montana's coal.
So this particular development would impact current mines?
More likely than anything else, what would happen is it would either drive other mines in Montana out of business or crash the price so low that they would have to cut wages.
Or the alternative, and the company has said this a couple times, is shipping the coal overseas.
Yeah, Yeah, and that's a very important point. There's a lot of talk that, well, if the market doesn't exist here, we'll ship it to China, and they will burn it there. And, really, I'm not sure if that's the best use of our state land and our state resources. So with that, why don't we go ahead and open this up, because you guys didn't come here to listen to me talk all night. We came here to listen to you. What we have here, how we'll start this out, we've got a sign-in list that we wanted to get people who really wanted to speak signed up. We'll go through this list first, and if there's anybody who wants to speak afterwards, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to sign a piece of paper to get up here and talk. What I will ask is that folks try to keep their comments relevant to the coal mines, to Otter Creek. We're not going to put time limits on your comments like the land board would, but we will ask that you keep in mind that there's other people waiting to talk, so try to be as concise as you can. Another thing, applause are welcome. Instead of discourage, you don't have to wait till the end, so we encourage people to reward good comments when they're up here. That all being said, I'll call Jay Bostrom to the podium. I feel very official. Yes, they are. As you can see behind you, we are videotaping this whole event. We will be delivering a copy of the videotape to each land board member. Okay, take it away, Jay.
This one or that one?
Talk into that one, but this should pick up.
Hello? Okay.
That's just for that.
Oh, that's just for that.
That's to make sure the land board hears you. Yeah, that's the most important one.
Great. Thank you very much for hosting this event. And my name's Jay Bostrom. I'm a Spanish teacher at Big Sky High School, and I'm here to talk about my concerns about Otter Creek and as they pertain to what I do for a living, as well as my concerns as a worker and as a concerned citizen about my future. I came here tonight with a student group who filled this corner of the room here. I'm very proud of the work that we do, and I'm very excited to hear their comments and their input. But one of the things I want to really get out there right off the bat is, what do I tell young people about us as adults when we run this world into the ground? I think that one of my obligations or ideas about what we teach in schools, or what we hope to accomplish as teachers, is accountability. But I feel so two-faced standing in front of my students asking them to be accountable when I know that right outside the window is a tempest of issues and problems and wars and destruction that none of us faced. And I feel like as an adult, how can I ask them to be accountable for anything when we've not been accountable to them? And I think about the way we've leased their future, and at this point, just end with the word lease, just say destroyed their futures. I mean, one more coal mine. And I just wonder at what point we're going to wake up, at what point we're going to stop needing and being so greedy for every little thing as we fuel China's coal plants for more sweatshop labor. One of the issues we work on is sweatshops. We work on fair trade, and we're going to hopefully talk a little bit about that tonight, but I feel like we fuel sweatshops with coal from Montana. I'm also a teacher who's going to be receiving, hopefully a salary increase, and maybe even some new equipment and books from coal. And to me, it feels like genocide money. And I don't want that. I don't want that in my school. I don't want that money. So as a Spanish teacher and someone who's proud of working in Latin American studies, I think about the places I've been and things I've seen, and I recently spent a summer in Chiapas with the Zapatistas, with a few of the young students who will speak tonight. And I think about how Chiapas is a resource-rich area, probably one of the richest areas of all of Mexico. And they supply 30% of all of Mexico's energy, but 85% of Chiapans have no electricity. And this is just one instance of a history, a legacy in this globe of extracting resources from indigenous lands to benefit someone else. And I definitely didn't come to lecture the Northern Cheyenne in their issues and their plight and this effort to survive and the historical issues that they have, which cannot be, I think, overstated. I think that there just needs to be a pause, though. If you look at Bolivia, if you look at Peru, if you look at any of these countries, and you don't have to go much further than Crow Agency next door to know what mines do. They don't help your economy. They're not going to help the Northern Cheyenne. It's a 30-year project with a long-term issue, really a long-term devastation of their environment. And so I think that from a worker's perspective, what's the alternative? I think the alternative is do nothing. Preserve your natural environment. Make that your resource. Above all else, I think that we have to, as adults, finally answer to these young people and promise and commit to being accountable. And you hear stories today everywhere. You know, today I was watching a video with young people about climate wars and the U.S. preparing troops. You know, preparing troops in Africa for the first global climate wars, in Kenya, in Egypt, knowing that these things are going to happen everywhere. And how does that make us better in the future? I mean, what are we doing? We're just getting ready to defend, you know, or what? What are we defending? We're going to be fighting off people who are pissed off. And I can't really look them in the face very much and feel very genuine as a person asking for accountability from them. And I'm tired. I'm really tired of that. And so my last plea for the state land board here is think about how irresponsible we've been and end it. Stop being so irresponsible. Be accountable for once. So you can look these kids in the face and you can look yourself in the mirror. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Susie Russett. Here you are, Susan.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Susie Rosette. I just recently moved to Montana and found out what was going on, so I decided to come tonight and let my voice be heard. So, to whom it should concern, coal mining is an extremely destructive and dirty process. There's no such thing as clean coal. No matter how you look at it, extracting coal destroys the land, environment, and ecosystems. Every place where there is and has been a coal mine, there's a significant impact on the land and the people in the surrounding areas. As Americans, we're supposed to be leading the way in sustainable energy resources. How can we show others to do the right thing if we keep making all our decisions based on money and bad judgment? We have to look at the bigger picture, people. We need to advance our way of thinking instead of falling back into old routines just because we can't think of better ideas. What are our kids and grandkids going to do when the water they drink is toxic and the air they breathe is as well? Will then we stop thinking about our wallets? If you do the smallest amount of research on the destructiveness of coal mines, you can clearly see the impact is huge. Even in the beginning of coal mines, there have been many problems resulting in deaths and enormous environmental disasters. People working in the mines, people living near the mines, as well as everybody on this planet is affected in a bad way by coal. There are towns in West Virginia near coal mines where most all of the people are dying of cancer. Even just about this time last year, an estimated 5.4 million cubic yards of toxic slurry spilled into the Tennessee River Valley after a retention wall failed. They are calling it a bigger disaster than the Exxon Valdez oil spill. There are several accounts of this happening, usually resulting in many deaths. What do the coal companies plan to do with all of this toxic sludge? It seems that they just keep filling up these reservoirs, and that's as far as their imagination goes. Doesn't seem too sustainable to me. Do we want Otter Creek to become the next front page disaster story? I'm sure the ranchers in eastern Montana are hoping not, as well as others in Montana, Wyoming, and many other places. I think that if our country is ever going to make a difference and truly be the leaders in protecting our planet, we need to make better decisions in the way we impact our environment, especially in our own country. After all, we are all in this together. As the Cree proverb goes, only when the last tree has been cut, the last river is polluted, and the last fish is caught, will we realize we cannot eat money. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. All right, I'm not great at reading people's handwriting, so I just got to admit that right now. But I've got Skylar and Francie who have signed up together, or Francie. Here you go.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, I'm Skylar, and this is Francie. She's a German foreign exchange student from Germany, and we're Big Sky High School students, and we both feel very strongly against the strip mining at the creek because even though it would fund our education, we don't want to support blood money. And what we mean by that is mining will destroy our wildlife, tear up some of Montana's oldest ranches, and it would release 2.5 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is bad because we are currently supposed to be cutting our emissions for multiple reasons, and she's going to tell you that.
Well, some of those reasons are that we want to help the developing countries. We want to slow the rising sea levels and the warming temperature. We want to stop the species going extinct and to get more towards home. We don't want the end of Glacier National Park, which would happen if we would go on like we do. Well, a German quote says, "Wie du mir, so ich dir," which means something like, whatever you take, you will have to give back. So if we would destroy our environment like that, by taking all the coal and shipping it to China, well, we would have to pay it back sooner or later, and we obviously cannot afford that. So we should just not take it. Thank you.
Emily Steris? Stevens? How close am I?
Not very good.
Here you go.
Okay, so I'm Emily, and I'm a freshman at Big Sky High School in this beautiful state of Montana. And this is a state where its beauty is just being marred. And part of the reason why its beauty is just being destroyed is partly because of this coal mine. Okay, the site that is to be mined is part of state school trust land, I know that, and so whatever money will be made should be going towards my education, but I don't exactly want this money for my education. I don't want the books that you bought with the money that was made by selling this land. I don't want the technology you got from selling our state. I don't want the sports equipment that you got from destroying our state. For me and other students to accept this money made by destroying Montana wilderness is to accept that we don't care about our state and our planet. But we do care. We care about what happens to our planet, because it will one day be ours. We care about if we have a beautiful state that we can one day explore with our kids. We care about whether or not our planet is a safe, clean place when we inherit it. We also care about our education, but we don't want an education this way. To give up the safety and state of our planet for the sake of our education is to teach us to fish without giving us a river to fish in. You can teach us all you want, as well as you want, but if you don't take care of our planet and our state more, you give us no place to use our education and our knowledge. I know that mining this land will destroy this area. I know that all vegetation on this land will be bulldozed. I know that the areas around this will have waste dumped on it. I know that the area will never again be the same, and that we can never fix it. And to give this up for our education is just wrong. And I know that this isn't what I want to happen, all for my education. There are still ways to get us a better education and still leave us a great place to inherit. There are better ways to use this land to help us. There are cleaner ways for us to get this education without having to get our energy without having to tear up our planet. Yes, you should think about our education, But also think about what you're leaving us with to work with when we have this education. Go through with the money, and you give us some improved education for a short period of time, but you leave us all with a plan to work with that is a state worse than ever before. Don't open up this land for coal mining, though. Leave us a great planet to work with later on by not opening up this coal mine, and also you can still improve our education through different ways, through cleaner ways, through better ways. We don't want an education that you got by destroying our planet, because without a planet, we have no life to look forward to. Thanks. And my full name is Emily Sturbis.
Yeah, if I butcher your name, you're going to have to say it, you know. Oh, this is easy. Michael Phelps. Finally. Here you go, Mike.
No relation. And if the land board doesn't watch these videos, I'm going to tell this to them again on Monday. Members of the land board, my name is Michael Phelps. I'm a resident of Arley, Montana. Know that there are enormous quantities of naturally occurring greenhouse gases trapped in ice-like structures in the Arctic and at the bottom of the seas. These ices, called clathrates, contain 3,000 times as much methane as in the atmosphere. Methane is more than 20 times as powerful of a greenhouse gas as carbon. A temperature increase of merely a few degrees would cause these gases to volatilize and release into the atmosphere, which would further raise temperatures, releasing yet more methane, heating the earth and seas further, and so on. There's 400 gigatons of methane locked in the frozen Arctic tundra, more than enough to start this chain reaction. Once triggered, this cycle could result in runaway global warming of a most apocalyptic nature. This is not a hysterical fantasy. It is backed by scientific data, and geologic evidence suggests that something similar has happened at least twice before, killing off 95% of all life on Earth and recovering only after some 100 million years. Scientists globally have demonstrated that this warming is real, the Earth's temperature is already rising, the Arctic is melting, and it is all caused by human activity. This is fact, and sticking your fingers in your ears while singing God Bless America will not make it not a fact. Members of the Land Board, the World Health Organization defines a psychopath as one with callous unconcern for the feelings of others, gross and persistent attitude of irresponsibility and disregard for social obligations, incapacity to experience guilt over damage caused, and a marked proneness to offer rationalizations for the behavior that has brought the subject into conflict with society. Members of the Land Board, if the Otter Creek coal tracts are leased, you will have opened the door for Montana to triple its rate of carbon emission in just a few short years. You will be helping to sign the death warrants of billions of people, including your own children and grandchildren and mine, even as we plead with you not to. And you will be doing so in direct and blatant conflict with your obligations as elected officials of this state. I urge you to consider for a moment what your needs are as humans, families, lovers, friends, and representatives. What are your needs as presumably sane members of the human race? There is a new business as usual in the world. It is the business of saving ourselves from extinction. Success is measured through ecology, not economy, and the status quo of the previous generation is no longer viable. Members of the Land Board, your lives may be expendable, but the Earth's is not. Otter Creek is not for sale. Thank you.
There is something so just remarkably insane about the fact that we're having this conversation tonight as world leaders are gathering in Copenhagen trying to figure out how to reduce our carbon emissions globally. I still can't get over that. Rachel Dickinson. There you go.
Hi, Hi, my name is Rachel Dixon, and as a freshman at Big Sky, I feel very strongly against the strip mining in Otter Creek. I really don't want the money brought in from this mine to pay for my next 3 years of education. Not only will I feel tremendous guilt about where this money is coming from, but it's just plain wrong, and it will cost our planet greatly in the long run. I thought this quote from Paul Brooks pretty much summed it up for me. In America today, you can murder land for private profit. You can leave the corpse for all to see, and nobody calls the cops.
Thank you, Rachel. Judy Matson.
You got it right.
Finally.
I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to the land board. I won't be able to go to Helena, so I appreciate being able to talk to you tonight. My name is Judy Matson. I'm a resident of West Riverside, and I really do appreciate all of the comments and all of the young faces in the audience tonight. It's deja vu all over again for me. In the 70s, we were struggling to stop coal strip and the degradation of the agricultural lands. Same things that we are hearing tonight. I see heads shaking in the audience. But it's even more so that now, because not only is it all of the same old reasons, but we know that climate change is real and on the verge of becoming irreversible. I urge the land board not to lease its share, or Montana's share, of the coal in the Otter Creek drainage, for all of the reasons that we just talked about and the climate change. Jared Diamond's book, Collapse, starts with the chapter on Milltown, the cleanup of the Milltown Superfund site in the Clark Fork River Basin. I'm really familiar with that. It's in my backyard. I've been working on it for the last 10 years. And it's becoming to the point where we're starting the restoration. The river is going to be cleaned up as best man can possibly do it. And it's a fabulous success story. So it's pretty ironic that we're here tonight trying to fend off climate degradation when we just spent the last 10 years trying to clean up one river. We give the Copper Kings a pass. They didn't know better, or they didn't care about the environment 100 years ago. Today, we do know better. Climate change is on the verge of becoming irreversible. We do not have the technology to use coal without enormous negative consequences. I've campaigned for all 5 of the land board members, Linda and Denise in particular, because I believe that they would be good leaders. So I know in particular that Linda and Denise have a passion for our young people, particularly their education, and we see some of the products of the great Montana school system here tonight. For the land board to lease this coal to be burned, releasing billions of tons of carbon dioxide, certainly does send a message to these young people, doesn't it? That we are willing to write the final chapter of Collapse, and it's going to say that we don't have the will to accept reality and to protect our children and the earth.
Thank you. Rose Dixon. Are there 2 Rose Dixons?
There's 2 of us, but I'm Rose Dixon, and I'm Alicia Nelson. And as seniors, trying to figure out what our futures are, we're appalled by the decision to open up Otter Creek to mining. Well, this might make money in the short term. It lacks the forethought to all the many problems that will be created, problems that our generation will have to will be stuck with. So we're asking you to just say no to destroying our planet, and no to handing your kids one more problem to deal with tomorrow.
Thank you. Allison Lawrence.
Hi, my name is Allison Lawrence and I'm with SIEGE, the student group here. We are Students for Social, Economic, and Environmental Justice. We are based out of Big Sky High School. I, like all of you, am very concerned about the massive extraction of coal in eastern Montana. But since I'm a pleasant, undisruptive citizen, I'm going to comply with Brian Schweitzer's request to only talk about coal and not go off topic. This 30-year process is going to supply jobs for only half of one generation, but is promising to stimulate the entire economy. So for 30 years, human beings can work in incredibly dangerous, dirty jobs, which will vanish with the coal. But I apologize, because unemployed people are not coal and should therefore be dismissed. Land is sacred and must be protected because trees have no lungs, flowers have no vocal cords. The quiet benefits we receive from these plants will be removed. A precious and sustainable resource will be stripped to gain temporary wealth and permanent damage to the atmosphere. But I apologize again because our earth is not coal and should therefore be dismissed. Montana is a place of beauty and much of our state revenue is from tourists visiting our magnificent state. So in order to keep Montana in the black, we are destroying acres upon acres of land with no foreseeable plans for sufficient reparations. Vast plains with wildflowers and native grasses are going to be squelched by barren rock and giant pits, along with the waste of harmful machines and carcinogenic slurry. But I apologize once again because preservation of priceless property is not coal and should therefore be dismissed. On top of that, Montana is not receiving the dirty power of coal. All 1.3 tons of coal could be shipped to China, providing power to them at our expense. 2.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide will be pumped into the air and we profit from none of it. Why are we putting band-aids on our national debt instead of working towards a plan to keep Montana sustainable? But I apologize because air pollution and only negative effects, save for the iPods we purchased from sweatshops, is not coal and should therefore be dismissed. The removal of coal in the natural aquifer of eastern Montana will pollute the groundwater, vital to irrigation and wildlife. Their life source will be polluted and undrinkable. But water as life is not coal and should therefore be dismissed. We were told as children to protect our Mother Earth, regardless of our races, religions, or creeds. And yet now the powerful people of the world are trying to find clever ways of raping her in broad daylight, without our sisters and brothers noticing. We continue to dismiss her and sell her out. Eventually, she will forsake us. Why are we rushing headlong towards an orphanage when there is no foster planet willing to take 6 billion spoiled brats? But our futures are not coal and should therefore be dismissed. Thank you.
This is so much more interesting than a normal hearing. Jenny Goodwin, please. Godwin. Sorry.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jenny Godwin, and I'm a senior at Big Sky High School here in Missoula. What hit me most learning about the plans for Otter Creek was the presumption that somehow coal emissions don't affect climate change. Right. That's like saying tying your shoelaces together won't make you fall. We're tying ourselves in knots, making knots we expect our children to untie somehow. You expect me to untie. You can't talk about coal mining without mentioning climate change. It just isn't possible. When you're thinking of releasing 2.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, those emissions sure as hell impact climate change. And with climate change comes a whole slew of environmental problems and people problems. People affected by rising tides because of melting ice caps. People displaced because their homes, solid pieces of land where they lived, worked, built homes on for centuries, places their ancestors' bones are buried, and where their cultures were first sparked, are threatened. Their land is in danger of being swallowed by the bulging ocean's belly. Just to put it in perspective, it's predicted that if the Greenland ice sheet were to melt, that would be enough to raise global sea levels 23 feet, which would swallow up large parts of Florida and most of Bangladesh. Clearly, that's some large-scale melting, but small-scale melting is happening every day. People will be displaced and their livelihoods ruined right here in Montana because coal is under their homes. They'll be displaced halfway around the world. The number of environmental refugees is constantly growing. There will be 50 million by the end of 2010. And to make matters worse, these refugees aren't yet recognized by the United Nations, so they won't receive the aid recognized refugees, like refugees of war, are offered. I'm not a refugee. I'm not even considered an adult yet. But I'm not blind, and I refuse to stand in place and let my shoelaces be tied.
Thank you. Emerald, I'm not even going to try.
Have one. All right, I'm Emerald Juritza, and I go to Big Sky High School, and this is my letter to the landlord. Dear landlord, I thought this was a country of opportunity, yet you stripped my future from me. You are only looking out for number one. You only care about what's convenient for you. My opportunities, my education, my life as a citizen is being limited to your poor choices. I can almost see my future drifting away. What will my kids' lives be like? Will they have to worry like I worry? Or will everything be destroyed by then? Pay for my education, but do not, and I repeat, do not pay for it with money that will further fund genocide. Tecumseh once said, "Sell a country. Why not sell the air, the great sea, as well as the earth? Didn't the great Spirit make them all for the use of his children?" Thank you.
Okay, we're down to the last person on the sign-in sheet tonight. And it's a Mr., Mrs., or Miss Gordon. I'm sorry. I just can't make out your first name.
I'm going to take some of Ryan's water since before he takes it all out of the tongue river.
Pour it over his head.
He can have it back. My name is Greg Gordon, and I'm a resident of Missoula. I've spent a lot of time on the Tongue River. I don't know if there's anybody here that's from that area. Is there? One? Okay. And so maybe you'd like to come up and speak as well. But I'd like to talk a little bit, or I'd like to speak for those people. It's a long ways from the Tongue River to Missoula, 8 hours to be exact. And I just want to point out, I'm really inspired to see all the folks here, because I started working on this issue before the people in this part of the room were born. And that gives me some pause to think that it's been that long. And it also gives me some hope to think that there's future members of the land board sitting right over here. The Tongue River, for those of you who haven't been out there, and I urge everybody on the land board here to please investigate the area before you issue this decision, if you haven't already. There's not many places like this on Earth. There's not many places like this left in Montana. A single dirt road traverses the valley from the Tongue River Reservoir all the way to Ashland. There's no pavement, at least on the upper 3/4 of that stretch. There's very few towns. It's mostly large ranches. It looks like what Montana looked like 150 years ago. If you stop and you close your eyes and you open them, you think that you'll see herds of bison rolling over the hills and northern Cheyenne coming over the other direction. It's an amazing landscape. This isn't flat North Dakota type landscape. These is rolling badlands, ponderosa forests. Otter Creek lies surrounded on 3 sides by the Custard National Forest. These Custard National Forest lands were set aside, the coal in those lands was set aside under the, see if I have this right, Surface Land Reclamation Act of 1976. Surface Mine, thanks. And so the federal lands under the Custard National Forest cannot be mined. And all of a sudden, we are faced with a massive coal mine under Montana lands. In the 1970s, Northwest Power Planning Commission study invigorated the people of Missoula and united them with the people of eastern Montana, bringing them together on the issue that frightened everybody. That issue was to turn eastern Montana into the nation's energy source for coal. Most of eastern Montana would be strip mined, and that energy would be shipped all over the United States and into Canada for electricity. The result was that the people of Montana united, the east and west sides of the divide came together and effectively slowed that development down to a couple coal mines at Coal Strip instead of the massive amount of destruction that would have occurred. So with that as a background, I just want to make sure the Land Board really considers the advisability of leasing the coal in Otter Creek at this point. My primary objection is something that Michael Scott brought up, and that is the appraisal failed to consider the cultural, environmental, and economic costs of building the Tongue River Railroad. Anytime we talk about Otter Creek, we have to talk about the Tongue River Railroad. Not only would Otter Creek be turned into a coal mine, but this entire river valley would become an industrial zone. You'd have the freight lines running, the freight cars 30, 40 times a day of hundreds of coal cars running from Decker, Montana up to Ashland. The family that I know well that lives out there, the Alderson Ranch, if any of you have read A Bride Goes West, Nanny Alderson, that family still resides out in Bernie, Montana. They have 2 young kids, one's 5, one's 7. I saw their pictures about an hour ago. This family, this is the 6th generation that's lived on the same piece of land. And if this Tongue River Railroad goes right through the middle of their ranch, that's the end of it. They will not, so many coal cars a day will be going right through the middle of their ranch. They cannot traverse the ranch. It completely eliminates one of their pastures, the one that's closest to the river. It goes right behind the little school in Bernie. You can imagine a 1-room school, well, it's actually 2 rooms, 2-room schoolhouse, and the coal trains going just a few hundred yards outside that school every, like I said, 50 or 60 cars a day, day and night. It completely devastates the community, the social impacts, the environmental impacts of that railroad need to be taken into account. The Otter Creek has been opposed by area ranchers and many members of the Cheyenne tribe for 30 years. The railroad is a social and environmental disaster. It would severely impact the livelihood of family ranches, decrease property values, and have psychological and environmental effects. None of these impacts of the Tongue River Railroad are adequately addressed in the leasing proposal. The construction of the railroad makes for cheaper transportation for Wyoming coal, which is more desirable because of its low sodium content, and thus undermining development of the Otter Creek tracts and sacrificing the Tongue River Valley for nothing. As economist Thomas Power points out, it makes little economic sense to offer Otter Creek tracts when the leases for inferior coal is low. Perhaps if carbon sequestration technologies are developed, then the market for coal will rebound. That's probably unlikely. The Land Board has a long-term fiduciary obligation, as these folks pointed out, to use the state lands wisely. In the face of climate change, coal faces an uncertain future. It would be much more responsible to lease Otter Creek when the prices rebound or for other purposes, such as grazing lands. While some of the costs associated with coal development are financial, others cannot be reduced to dollars. The Tongue River remains unblemished by billboards, strip developments, subdivisions, and trophy homes. Coal development would turn this remote valley of ponderosa badlands, productive family ranches, and precious wildlife habitat into industrial wasteland of strip mines with the endless railroad from Wyoming to the Yellowstone River, resulting in permanent damage to the air, land, and water quality. And these costs will be borne by taxpayers and residents. And the cost of climate change, as these folks pointed out, will be the next generation. Enough people have talked about climate change. The history of Montana repeatedly demonstrates that mineral development benefits the wealthy out-of-state investors while leaving residents with a degraded landscape and massive cleanup costs. We need to think about our long-term sustainability. Our viability as a state and as a society depends not on resource extraction, but on agriculture. The development of Otter Creek and the construction of the railroad would sacrifice agricultural lands for short-term profits. I urge you, the land board, to withhold leasing Otter Creek tracts until an appraisal that fully addresses the social, environmental, and economic costs can take place. Thank you. I also have a letter here from a woman who couldn't come tonight. It was a longtime resident of the Tongue River Valley. Her name is Carolyn Walker. She lives here in Missoula. And she would like to talk about water. Whenever coal development is discussed, planned, or spoken about, it's impossible to do that without talking about water. When talking about developing mines, you need to think about the Tongue River Railroad, because in addition to disturbing and literally destroying the Tongue River Valley, with the railroad traversing all that good farm and hayland, the mining and development will interrupt and consume aquifers. As soon as the air and sun expose the coal seam that the water goes with it will be poisoned. This particular letter is about the folly of developing Otter Creek. First of all, due to climate concerns, the country is trying to get out of using coal. Second, it's not as though the $2.2 billion is upfront profit to the state of Montana. The cost of developing this have not been factored in. This means the railroad and the destruction of the Tongue River. It means new housing, roads, schools, power, water development, law enforcement, in a word, turning the most productive agriculture and grasslands left in the state to suburban but still remote mishmash. In the early days of the anticipated coal boom, the BLM developed something called the North Central Power Study. The area covered in that study went from the Canadian border down through eastern Montana, western North Dakota, and halfway through the eastern half of Wyoming. The EIS on that absurd document included a sociological study by Dr. Ray Gold of the University of Montana. This was done in the 1970s. The area is the Fort Union Formation. One of the results was that family violence rate was extremely high. This was the fact that the average age in Gillette, Wyoming, and the other towns in the middle of the boom at that time was 26. There were, and still are, in these boom communities, no old people or adult parents or intergenerational interaction to keep traditions and the basic rules of society going. Although I'd have to add that if this is an indication of Jay's class or here the future direction of society, I think we're in good hands. The main deficit in the study was the shortage of information about the Cheyenne and the Crow tribes. Aside from the environmental and economic damage this development will bring, the sociological damage would be incalculable. I urge you to vote no on this proposal. It would not be cost-effective either. Sincerely, Carolyn Walker.
Thank you, Greg. Well, we've turned into an open mic. I see Representative Erickson's here. Here you go, sir.
Thank you. I used to be a representative, now I'm a senator, so it's fun too. My name's Ron Erickson. I do represent Southeast Missoula in the Montana State Senate. And I want, first of all, to thank particularly all the young people who've come and had such great words for us. It's a good thing to see. My perspective is a little different. I taught for a long time at the University of Montana. I gave my first talk on global warming more than 40 years ago. And back then it was a theory and now it's real. But I want to talk specifically to the land board. I know all of the land board members. I know them well, pretty well, particularly Linda and Monica. Sat next to Monica for a whole session once. And I know that the land board does have responsibilities, and it has real long-term concerns. And one of those concerns was talked about earlier tonight with funding schools. And that's an important topic, something that they have to think about. But in fact, what they have to think about most of all is the future. And that's so hard for politicians. It's so hard for politicians because they're not going to be there but for 4 or 8 or 12 or maybe 16 years. But what we need to worry about is the distant future. Global warming is the problem, and coal is an interesting resource because right now, every way we use coal has to do with burning it. Either we burn it for electric power, or we have the possibility in the future, and Brian, I know in particular, is very interested in this, in making it into a liquid, which will then burn, putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But in fact, if we think long-term enough, we can recognize, and now I'm speaking as the chemist I used to be at one time, coal is carbon, and carbon is useful for things other than burning. And there'll come a time when all of these folks who are now so young will be quite a bit older. In fact, I'm thinking of the time in the 22nd century when all the other fossil fuels are gone and we still want to make chemicals one way or another, and we could still have that carbon left in eastern Montana to be able to use in a recyclable way as chemicals rather than this terrible, terrible process we have of, as someone was saying, perhaps flooding out Bangladesh. So, land board, think farther into the future than we, all of us as politicians, usually do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, who else wants to talk? There's one.
Hi, I'm Sarah Anderson. I'm a freshman at the University of Montana. I've been in Missoula for 12 years though. I am on scholarship, got the Presidential Leadership Scholarship, state money. And I really, really appreciate that. I am really stressed about money, and so it takes a weight off my shoulders, but it's not a weight off my shoulders if that money comes from coal. There's a climate change minor at the University of Montana. That's pretty much all we have to go on to deal with these issues that the coal, that 1.3 billion tons of coal that we're thinking about digging up. And that's clearly not enough. That's just my input. We can't deal with it with what little educational areas we have right now, and what money you're going to give us isn't going to do that much more, so we might as well leave it in the ground so we don't have to deal with that much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who'd like to comment? Looks like we have a couple people who'd like to comment. We'll go here and then back here. Here, sir.
Thank you. My name's Dave Jones. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Two Rivers General Membership Branch of the IWW here in Missoula. I'm going to veer just a little bit off topic. It's not really strictly Otter Creek I'm going to talk about, but about the process that we're involved in here tonight. I think it's important for everyone to understand that there are 3 parallel processes taking place when it comes to decisions about using public lands. There is this process right here that is open, transparent, where the people who are the actual owners of the land and who therefore have legal and moral standing regarding how the land is used, let their voices be heard. This is the ignored process, the shunned process, and derided process. The reason it's derided is because it models something very dangerous to the established system. The second process I want to talk about is the official one, where a land board composed of representatives who are entrusted with an official duty to serve the people's interests, listen to evidence within legally prescribed boundaries, and make their official policy. This is the process reported on by the press, talked about by the pundits, and legitimized by all the discourses of accepted authority and power. This so-called public process purports, with a cynical wink and a nod, to be open. Civil society is expected to bear witness to and approve this process with the standard minor partisan complaints. The third process is one that imposes itself. It neither asks for nor needs any permission to do so because it is a thinly veiled process, pretending it doesn't exist and demanding that everyone else participate in the lie as well. It is dominant because it is the economic process and simply uses the, quote, political public process as cover. In Montana, this process is as old as the copper barons, only now it is big energy which is calling the shots. It is only by understanding the logic of capitalism that we can reconcile the proposal for huge new coal development projects coinciding with a global summit on climate change. These same three parallel processes are taking place on that scale as well because capitalism is a total world system of economic control. Those few governments, mostly from the global south, and those masses of global citizens who are calling for system change, not climate change, should be our model here on the state level as well. They are telling us that the issue before us is not just one of emissions or coal mining, but of a new democratic system replacing the old corrupt one. Justice requires that we dismantle the three-track system dominated by profit and replace it with a one-track system where people make decisions instead of markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have another speaker. Here you go.
Thank you. My name is Bill Flannery. I live here in Missoula. I'm not as cynical about the capitalist system as the previous speaker, and I hope that the land board really will take to heart what is said here. And I think that if you do take your responsibilities seriously as public officials entrusted with the stewardship of our land as well as our human resources in this state, that you will listen to these people and that you will make the decision that will be best for our future. First of all, I would like to say that the proposed Otter Creek coal mining project would be bad for agriculture. It would be bad for agriculture because it would ruin the water that agriculture depends on in that area. It would destroy the aquifer that is under the ground there as well. And this would be devastating to an important part of our economy. It would be bad for the environment. Wildlife there would be limited in not only their ability to get food and water, but in their ability to move across the land, because the Tongue River Railroad would hamper animal migration. It would be bad for other coal mines. I am sure that you're a little bit concerned about the impact upon our existing economy, and it would certainly introduce competition that would be detrimental to the existing mines that we have in this state. But above all, it would be bad for the climate. of our whole earth. And I think we really need to get serious about this. I think it's ironic that so many of our public leaders are still unconvinced of the seriousness of global warming and of the potential for devastation to our climate. Thank you. The concern that I have is that we will act too late to prevent the devastating consequences. The consequences of releasing methane gas into the atmosphere, which, as a previous speaker pointed out, is 30 times as potent greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. And with so much of this trapped under the Arctic ice shelf, the Arctic ice, that would be a terribly devastating thing to happen. We don't have a lot of time. We must act soon to prevent the disaster of a drastic climate change. As was pointed out last night on TV, the possibility of a climate change of 9 degrees, 10 degrees over the next few decades would be so serious that we ought to take out insurance against that by doing all we can now to prevent that from happening. We're already on course for nearly that much climate change, and it could be much worse than forecast. So we must act, and the Land Board is in a crucial decision-making point here, and I hope that you will make the right decision. Thank you.
And we have another one. And we have at least 2 more. Here you go.
Hi everyone, my name is Darian Dunning. I'm actually from Otter Creek. I grew up on a ranch that is just about 2 to 3 miles south of where the proposed coal tracks are on Otter Creek. I'd really like to thank all of you for coming. One thing I've noticed since moving to western Montana, I tell people that I'm from Otter, Montana, and I get a lot of blank stares. Where is that at exactly? And it's been a struggle for me to be able to convey a sense of value of why people should care. Why people should care about the Tongue River Valley, why people should care about Otter Creek. My family's ranch has been in my family for over 120 years, since my great-great-grandfather settled there and started raising horses, and then now my family raises cattle there. So I understand what the local people, what the ranchers that are going through, not only in Otter Creek, but also those that rely on the Tongue River for irrigation, those families that have been there for so long. My brother and I learned to fly fish in the Tongue River, and those areas hold special meaning to my heart. So thank you all for coming to express some of your frustrations with the leasing of this part of land that's very important, I think, to all of Montana. Tonight there have been a lot of people that have talked about the environmental impacts of strip mining, the climate change impacts, the water impacts. We also have the impacts that the Tongue River Railroad will pose, which are their own separate issues. And I guess what I'd like to talk a little bit more about tonight is to the members of the State Land Board. I'd like to say that I understand the pressures and the obligations that they are under due to the state land trust duties. I understand that. And I guess what I would ask the State Land Board members to consider is that they also have an equal and offsetting constitutional responsibility to protect and maintain our clean and healthful environment. And I understand that it's sometimes difficult to make those political decisions that might might not necessarily help you when it comes around to the next election. At least, I mean, some people, like myself, will definitely support you if you make the decision not to lease the Otter Creek coal tracks, but I do understand that it's politically can be murky waters. But I would urge the state land board members to not just punt this decision, to not rely on NEPA, to not rely on a legal doctrine that has been so diminished over the last few years that it really does not stand to adequately address the environmental impacts of the decision to lease the Otter Creek coal tracks. The decision to protect our state's clean and healthful environment, the decision to protect Otter Creek lies right now in this decision to lease the Otter Creek coal tracks. I'd ask the state land board members to please be our voice, to please stand up for that clean and healthful environment, to not lease based on a faulty study. You know, that coal is in the ground, it's not going anywhere. We have the time. We have the time to do the studies. We have the time to do this right. We have the time to adequately consider all of the impacts that this is going to have. And right now, that has not been done. So I just want to reiterate that I understand the dilemma, the pressures that you face, but that I would ask you to please do the right thing, to please say no to right now leasing the Otter Creek coal tracks. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And just so we have an idea, how many more people are thinking they're going to speak? We got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4? Yeah. 3. Okay, we'll settle at 3 for now.
Hi, my name's Kathleen Kennedy, and I teach science at Big Sky High School. And I have been so inspired and impressed with this showing of student voices. And I want to kind of counter that because I know that several members of the land board have ties to education, and one I would actually consider my boss in a lot of ways, Denise Juneau, and is somebody that I totally respect and am inspired by. But I think if you make this decision to lease these coal tracks, you actually make my job harder. Because as a science teacher, my job is to inform students about the realities of natural resource use and the realities of not living sustainably on this planet. And right now I have a lot of kids that look at me and think I'm crazy. What? We can keep doing this forever. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it always will be. There's no problem. And I have to make that hard decision to tell them the truth. And I get a lot of guff for it. I mean, I get people thinking that I'm out there, some radical, Chicken Little, whatever. But I know what my responsibility is as an educator. And I feel like if we make this decision from people in power to say that we can keep on doing business as usual, we're undermining the reality. We're undermining what the educational system should be doing, which is teaching the truth. We're saying that short-term monetary gain and continuing to live unsustainably can go on forever. And we know that. It's a finite planet. We have the resources that we have here. We need to use them responsibly. We need to look at the bigger picture. The other thing that I would like to say is I also have the responsibility as a science teacher of teaching about Indian education for all. And one of the things I always take pride in doing in making the science connections is to talk about the responsible stewardship that Native people had with their resources and still mostly do. And I was reading an article about Otter Creek, and I was really troubled that the Northern Cheyennes position is supportive of this because I've known them in other situations to have stood up against coal bed methane, and I have taught my students about those examples in the hopes that they would be inspired and learn something about that indigenous relationship to the land. And I was reading a quote from President Leroy Sprang, And, you know, he worked in the coal mine, so he's obviously had some economic experience and benefit from that. But he basically says we would be neglecting our people's best interests if we opposed Otter Creek. We've got nothing here. We're broke and we need money for education and for retirement. And as I try to teach my students about the legacy of basically what we've done in this country, it makes sense to me that, you know, this is another example of how we've put people in a position where they have no other choice. And as somebody that's educating for the future, I would like us to think outside the box. What are other feasible, responsible economic opportunities that we can cultivate in that area and not continue the pattern that we've seen for so many years? So I'd really like to ask you to oppose this for not only the future, but also so I can do my job and feel good about it and not worry about where my salary is coming from. Thanks.
Okay, we had a few volunteers I saw. And here comes one. Eventually you'll make it, right?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jessie Gilligan. Dear Land Board members, please do not try and fool me with the rationalization that the benefits outweigh the cost of mining in Otter Creek. Fill your leadership position and say no.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we have two more. Yeah, come on up.
I'm in need of a little bit of water myself, so.
Well, feel free. Nobody else is using it.
To the members of the Land Board, my name is Tony Feist. I've lived in Montana my whole life, and I feel it's important for me to be here this evening and share some of my thoughts on this whole thing. What I want to say at first is our land is our gift to our future generations, and that we're trading something that is priceless for a limited amount of jobs, a limited amount of time, and a limited amount of money. This coal can be kind of compared to a savings account. You know, I mean, we can either spend it all right now, have a short-term gain, and you know, maybe turn a little bit of profit for a little while. But what we're putting on the line is worth a lot more than that, I think. It's now the right time. You know, I mean, maybe in the future we'll have better methods of dealing with coal, like the senator mentioned earlier about making chemicals. You know, we need to think further into the future than we are currently. One of my questions that I had is, once the lease is sold, does the leasee have is there a possibility they may be able to resell a lease and generate a profit from that? And if so, you know, I don't believe that's right to be selling Montana state lands and watching some third party turn a profit off of our land. The estimated royalties from this coal would total roughly, this is from the DNRC report I read on the internet today, it roughly comes out to $35 million a year over 40 years. One question I have about that as well is, what's going to happen with inflation? Is the price of that coal and the $35 million in 40 years from now, what's that going to be equivalent to? I did a little research on an inflation calculator and came up with, you know, for 40 years from 1968 to 2008, if you would have had $35 million in 1968, you could have bought $214 million, $313,000 worth of goods. So, I mean, if in 40 years we need to have 214 million instead of 35 million, I think we're going to be hurting. Let's see here. I think, you know, I mean, I realize that we need to generate some money, generate jobs. I understand the pressure you guys are under to do this for Montana. I know times are tough right now. But I think I'm going to propose a little bit of an alternative. You know, how about becoming a leader in sustainable energy? You could be a leader in forestry. You could you could use biomass for energy production. You could put people to work thinning and improving habitats for wildlife, reducing risk of wildfires. You'd create a ton of jobs. You'd create something sustainable, renewable, and carbon neutral. The The jobs you guys are talking about seem pretty small in my mind as well. You're talking about 500 jobs for 2 to 3 years, working on the railroad, which, and other people have mentioned the cost of that sound pretty great to me. Even though you're, 500 jobs, it's not a whole lot really. And then my number 1 and my number 2, I don't know if those are going in at the same time or if those are going to be, 20 years on each or something, but they're talking only 250 jobs per mine, and that just doesn't seem like very much to me as far as, unemployment in Montana and people who need work. I just want to ask you guys finally that, is this the best thing that we can do right now? Is this something that is going to be something that future generations can look back on and say, we did the right thing here, and I just feel like we owe it to the future and our grandchildren's children to be able to say we did the right thing today. Thank you.
And do we have anybody else who'd like to get up and speak this evening? I see fingers pointing, so I'm assuming that means yes. Here you go.
Thank you. Are we supposed to identify who we are?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm Vicki Watson. I'm a resident here of Missoula. And I sympathize with the state land board. I feel they have a really difficult task, a very complex task of trying to be good stewards of the public resources on our state lands and conserving them so as to provide long-term support to Montana school children. But I want to point out that our school children's future depends on more than the money the schools have to spend in the next decade from the trust fund, important as that is, and it certainly is important. But viewed in the long term, our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, what they really need is a sustainable economy for Montana, because that also ultimately is the support of our schools through a whole variety of taxes. Coal development disrupts or even destroys many of the sustainable uses of surface resources, our soil and water, our forest and grasslands, and these support what are potentially sustainable industries, agriculture, forestry, tourism. They also support property values, and these are all part, again, of a sustainable economy that would provide support to our schools into the long term. They also support the wildlife, clean air, and water that makes life worth living here in Montana. So in addition to these concerns, which I think pretty much all Montanans would recognize and think the the land board should have in mind while making this decision, Montana's own Nobel laureate and a majority of the world's climate scientists are convinced that the evidence is strong that continued use of coal as an energy source will put the future of all the world's children at risk, including Montana's children. Montana's often been a leader in resisting destructive development and preserving the last best place. So I want to call on the land board to keep that historical emphasis of Montana in mind. And also to note that even energy companies are beginning to question whether coal is a good investment. They know it's only a good investment if they get it really cheap, because they're expecting a lot of more and more expensive regulation of coal down the road. So I'm just convinced that it's really a better investment for our children's future to invest in conserving our sustainable resources, and coal is in direct conflict with conserving those sustainable resources. It's sometimes been said that conservationists are sort of like misers. Misers are kind of hard to live with, but they make great ancestors. So I'm asking the land board to decide to be great ancestors.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jenny Ferguson. I'm a resident of Missoula. I was born and raised in Montana, and my family has been here for generations. And I'm not going to say much tonight because I feel like a lot of things have already been said, but I just want to urge the land board to leave the coal in the ground, and that there's not a price that's high enough to extract it at this point. And to please consider the impacts on the Tongue River when you're considering the impacts of the mine. Thanks.
Okay, is there anybody else who'd like to get a comment in before we close up this evening? I think most of the people in the room have actually commented. Brent, did you want to make an announcement here?
Yeah. I'm Brent Rowley. I'm with Northern Rockies Rising Tide, one of the 3 groups that put this on. And part of the reason we had this hearing here is so that, because Governor Schweitzer wouldn't let us comment on anything in Helena when they had their last land board meeting about climate change. He was like, if you got up and talked about climate change, he was like, that's off topic. And if you noticed, a couple of the students alluded to that. This coming Monday, they're having the final decision-making day in Helena, and they're going to have a public comment about whether to lease Otter Creek again. And so a bunch of us are going to carpool to Helena if anyone is interested. So I guess come and talk to me afterwards if you're interested in going to Helena for that meeting.
Does anybody else have anything else to say before we close? Well, we've got a few people. Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to go back. Again, I was in Chiapas with Zapatistas, and I think it's embarrassing to think that we live in a democracy. In the Zapatista territory, they have a saying which says, "Here the people command and the government obeys." And I just think of how we're sitting here in a room with empty chairs, and how embarrassing that is, especially in front of young people that we have to say pledges with and sing God Bless America. And I don't think it's cynical to have that feeling that it should be different. I think that's a hope for some sort of difference and change, and so we have something more optimistic. And like Dave Jones alluded to earlier, why is that? Why do we have a system where there is no democracy, no functioning democracy? Most of us are pretty cynical about what this land board vote's going to turn out to be, that they'll go ahead and issue the permit despite what we've said here tonight. And so we hope that people don't stop there. We really do. We hope this is an organizing effort as much as anything, and that if the land board makes this poor decision, which I feel cynically they will, because they don't listen, they don't obey, then they're going to go ahead and do it, but we still have an obligation to continue to fight it in future hearings and whatever we have to do to stop it. So, thank you.
Yes.
My comment is thank you very much for making this possible tonight.
No, you're more than welcome. Tyler and Ann and everybody from Rising Tide did a great job tonight. Thank all of you guys. What I want to leave everybody with is a phone number, because I want everybody calling the land board tomorrow. So anybody with a pen and paper handy, please take this down. You guys, and really, I think a round of applause for the students that came here tonight too. I was thinking back to when I was your age, I don't think I could have gotten up and given public comments. I think that's very impressive, and thank you guys for coming out. But tomorrow, I'd like everybody to call the land board, and there's a central number you can call and leave a message for all 5 land board members. So you're going to call 406-444-6699. You're going to reach Lucy Richards there, and tell her you want to leave a message in regards to Otter Creek, and tell her you want it to go to all the land board members, because we can do what we can do here tonight. We will be delivering this video and audio footage to the land board. But they need to hear from you. Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without demand, and that is what our job is here. It's to demand. So thank you all for coming tonight. If you have any other questions or want to chat about this afterwards, just catch one of us on the way out, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.